Well, good morning, Bob.
It's the afternoon.
Oh, you're right. So this is a special lunchtime edition because Bob's always working.
That's right.
But thank you so much for coming and joining us today. So many of you have recognized Bob and his face on Fox Good Day LA, Channel 11. But what many people don't realize is that Bob actually was reporting in New York City, the largest DMA in the United States, and he came to Los Angeles, the second largest DMA. But I loved learning that Bob actually reported from ground zero. So let's just start a little bit back in those moments of time. What were you thinking? How long had you been on the news desk? And, when they said you were going to go out and report, what was that like?
Well, I wasn't on the news desk on that day, and actually in New York City, I was a reporter for our Fox affiliate there in New York. And gosh, it's hard to believe that it was that long ago.
21
right?
years ago, yeah.
But it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
I was asleep at the time in the morning because I worked the 10 o'clock news. I was a 10 o'clock news reporter for the Fox 5 News at 10. And the phone rang it was close to 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was my brother. And he said, are you okay? Are you okay? And I said, what's going on? What's going on? He said, turn on the TV. Turn on the TV, and of course, I saw all of the images that everybody saw on that day with the burning tower, the burning South Tower. So I was just in shock, and I was a youngster and so young. It was my first big break as a news reporter in New York, and I was just shocked and stunned and didn't know what to do. My first reaction was to try and call the news desk, but couldn't get through. I finally get through, and they were all in disarray as well. And they said, whatever you do, just try to get to Lower Manhattan as quickly as you can. And so I just dressed, got some clothes on, started walking. I lived on the Upper West Side, which is probably about 4 miles maybe from Lower Manhattan. And I started just walking. I was walking downtown, and all the cabs, all the trains had stopped. And as you're going downtown, all you saw were masses of people going across the bridges, the tunnels, people jumping into cabs and saying, come on in, let's get out of here, let's get out of here. And they were all rushing, just trying to escape the city. And I just kept walking and walking and walking. This can be a long story. I'm sorry.
This is a guy who has to fit his stories in 4-minute
I know.
segments.
I'm sorry. There was a lot that happened that day, and then I'll try to shorten it a little bit. I get close to Lower Manhattan, and I remember it was a beautiful day. It was primary day, and I remember just seeing as I'm going down one of the avenues, as I'm getting closer, this giant dark cloud coming our way. And I turned, I looked to the left, and there was a young lady in a store next to me, and I ran inside the store. We ducked behind the counter, and we just watched as debris and darkness really went across the front of the store. And let that settle. She was crying, and I thought, I'm just going to continue walking on my way. So as I was walking on that way, I didn't realize that the North Tower had fallen. And our crews were already down at ground zero because it was primary day and they were already covering the elections. I ran into many of my camera crews, some of the reporters, and they were all covered head to toe in soot and blackness. You could only see the whites of their eyes. Some of them are not with us today. One of them who was, I said, are you okay? Are you okay? And he said, I thought I was going to die. He held the shot, and it's a shot that's kind of out there today that you see with the towers falling. And he watched it pancake, and he thought, I need to hold this shot. I need to hold this shot. And then thought, I need to start running. Started running, turned around, and then when the cloud overcame him, he said he couldn't breathe, and he really thought at that point he was going to die. So yeah, after that, just spent, weeks
Yeah.
down in ground zero, which was probably like, it's one of the most common questions that I get as a journalist is, what is the biggest story, or what's the craziest story you've ever covered? And that likely would be the biggest story that impacted my career.
Yeah. I mean, it impacted all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, thank you for sharing. I didn't realize that you were there in those moments walking. Did you get scared as you were walking forward, or did you realize that you played an important role?
Initially, I thought to myself, because again, there was so much going on. There were people trying to help other people. There were triage areas, and I thought to myself, should I help this group here and help some of the victims, at that point I realized the best thing I could do was to tell the news and do our jobs as best as we can to inform people about what was happening on that day.
Yeah. Well, it was important. And so thank you for that. Okay, so Bob came to LA just a few years later in 2004.
2004, right.
So I've known Bob for 20-something years. I've actually, first time I met Bob was on Skid Row at 3:30 in the morning. So,
correct, yes.
And we've worked every year, multiple stories a year, telling the story of the homeless of Skid Row 21 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. And then fast forward here to Orange County and some of the work that we get to do here in Orange County. I still get to work with Bob. Bob is the longest running morning show reporter in Los Angeles.
I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to check that. I'm trying to think.
I actually think that we're pretty accurate, right? PR people?
It's probably up there, I'm sure.
Okay, so I
sure.
asked Bob what he felt like being like, that we're having a legacy. And so
Yes.
tell me what they just named
You
you as.
used the word legacy, and just recently, somebody in management said when they were talking, he says, "Oh yeah, well he's one of our legacy talent."
Nice. That's a nice way of saying you're old.
Yeah, old. or when you hear us being referred to as the OGs.
Yes.
It was just earlier this week we were doing a story on Dine LA, and I walked into the room. And the owner of this restaurant, the chef, says, "Oh my God, it's so crazy to actually have you in my restaurant today." He's like, "I was a kid. I would watch you in the mornings on Good Day LA eating my cereal. And then I would go to school. My little brother would watch cartoons. I would watch you. So it's just crazy to see you standing in my kitchen today."
Well, you have great skin, and you would think you're still 30, Bob. So, we worked many years down on Skid Row, telling stories about the homeless issue. We're in a major crisis of homelessness. But one of the stories that we told over and over and over and over and over again over the years was this story of the company that I was working with at the time is Etnies Shoes, and they had footwear that they would give out to the homeless. They'd give out 2,000 pairs of shoes every Easter.
Right.
And so I would ask Bob all the time, do you get tired of telling the same story every year? Like, we're like here every year, and you're assigned to us every year. When you get that assignment, you're like, oh man, this story again? And he was like, no, I'm always trying to find new ways of telling the story. So one time he decided to model the shoes. So
Right.
tell us what happened.
So Etnies, great shoes.
Oh, they're
Great
wonderful
Great
shoes.
shoes. Yeah, and I decided, hey, why don't I just, since they're giving out these free shoes, we're giving out shoes to the unhoused. Let's model some of the shoes and just show them what they're getting. I put on the shoes, and after the live shot, I turn around to put on my own shoes. They're gone. They're gone. So I said, my shoes are gone. Right, but hey, someone needed it more than I did, so
Yes.
I kind of took it in stride, right?
Because I wanted to show up with a pair of shoes today because
Yeah.
all the years of us not being able to give Bob
Yeah.
shoes, like we were surrounded by
Yeah.
thousands of shoes, and I never gave him a pair. But he reminded me of this
It's
story.
a well-known story because our news producers do know whenever they send me to Skid Row, like, oh, be careful for your
For
shoes.
shoes.
Yeah.
I love it. But then over the years, we've been able to tell other stories, and that's kind of where I want to focus on right now is the storytelling aspect. Because you did always make those segments fun, fresh, yet still driving to the heart of the issue of awareness about people experiencing homelessness and those who are, struggling to figure out how to connect during holidays and being separated from loved ones. You always found a way to create a human connection in a story that we literally have told 20 times together, like literally. But what I loved last year is reconnecting with you at City of Hope, which is one of our clients that we got the chance to open one of the most advanced comprehensive cancer centers here in the area. And we had a lot going on multiple times throughout the year, yet you still came out to every one of those events. And I kept thinking, is Bob really going to come again? I love that he's coming again. Tell me why.
Well, there's a big team of people that really go behind the story decisions that we make and what we decide to cover. And I do play a big role in that because often if it's something that's really important or I think that's really important for the public or that would be especially inspiring or engaging to our audience, then I always lean in and tell them, this is something that we should cover. But, going back to, let's say, the LA mission, I mean, it's such a critical part of keeping people informed, and also just the personal stories there of all the families and the struggles that they deal with every single day, and the personal stories of the people who work there and what they do and the time that they dedicate to make sure that that these people are uplifted. Those stories just don't get old, right? And there's just always a need to be able to have to tell those stories, and that's kind of what one of the missions I think of being on a TV station or as journalists is, telling these stories that uplift people or alert the public about issues that persist.
Yeah, but you always find a way to do it with a hopeful tone. And that I've noticed that is that the morning show is not necessarily always looking for those hard news, though you guys do. You're looking for things that uplift, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I like, it's one of the things that I like about working on a morning show is that we get to really learn and connect in a more meaningful way with people that we talk to in the story subjects that we approach.
Yeah.
So I just I like stories that are mode because if you're feeling something, then I think that the viewer's feeling something, and that there is a real story there, right?
Yeah.
You're telling a story about a human being, about someone who lives among us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have a unique job as a live morning show reporter. So you anchor 4 to 6, so you're delivering a lot of news.
Right.
You're reading off a teleprompter. You're having a lot of people tell you what to do, right? And then you go out in the field and you kind of are orchestrating a whole other different side.
Right.
So take us through how you think, because you think in pictures.
A lot in pictures, yeah. I think over the years, when you work in news and you work in television, we work in a visual medium, so everything is visual. And when you tell stories, and when we tell stories, of course, your words have to match the pictures. And so the most engaging way to tell a story is really to show pictures of what you're trying to convey. So most of the time when I walk, let's say, into a room, it's the first thing I start looking at, thinking of stories like, what are we going to see first? what's the most engaging thing to see. Yeah, so pictures are a real critical part, obviously, of telling a story, because we're trying to take people or viewers or audience to a place, and they might be sitting at home. We want to show them. We want to sort of take them there and sort of act like as if they're sitting in that particular space.
And unlike your evening news where they might be doing a live stand up to set up a story that they've prepackaged and cut, where they're having to write the story, you are dealing with 4-minute segments that are live. So you're not writing, but you're actually leaning on experts to do the storytelling. So how do you go about working that out?
So it's really unique, especially working on a show like Good Day LA, because we have, as soon as I'm out the door, it's like 5 more hours of news, of live television. And we don't have time to go back into our trucks or our cars or sit on a laptop and edit pieces of video, which we can edit things very quickly, but you can't necessarily edit a tracked piece or that's going to air within 45 minutes, or really to vet or edit the story and go through the proper channels to do so. So a lot of what we do is extemporaneous and off the cuff, and I think it's probably 95% of what we do on a show like Good Day LA. We walk in, and yeah, I do lean heavily on
everyone in this room.
The PR people. I mean, your knowledge is going to be my knowledge, right? So for me, I try to become the quickest expert on whatever the subject is that I'm talking about at the time, absorb as much of that information as possible, but of course I lean on the interview subjects, the people who are at the particular organization, the company, to be able to add the color to make the story a vibrant story. Right, so I can tell the basics, and often I make sure that I know all of that just in case things go awry, and I can tell the story myself. But yeah, it's really important that you have those interview subjects that really can tell a compelling story. So I walk into any story in the morning, and a lot of you folks that I've worked with in the morning, we just come in, tell me about it. I learned the basics, and then we look for the best shots. We look for good visuals, things that might tell the story in a compelling way, and then I decide kind of which questions will really bring out the best in the story.
Yeah, and you're really good at saying no. No, that's not going to work. Let's do this instead. But
it's a collaborative effort.
I love it. I love it. And I always
effort.
have a lot of fun with you. It's been a while since I've actually been on the ground with you working, because my team gets the chance.
I know.
And you were just at Working Wardrobes doing their retail store, and I saw the CEO last night, and she's like, I really want to be there because I want to know if Bob's worn the clothes he bought. I didn't know you bought them.
I bought one. I brought a jacket, so it's not time yet, but it's been sitting in the closet.
I love that you did that. You really get involved. You really genuinely care.
Yeah.
And it comes across. I think that's why you're. But what are some of the stories you care most about?
First of all, I do care, and I care. For me, when you end up meeting and you do these stories, and let's say it's a restaurant owner who is a small business owner, or a cancer center, right? These are people who are really doing great things and really care about. And I just want to do the best job for them, because so I want to just make sure I'm doing justice for them, and hopefully I can,
you do great. You do great.
Do something positive for them. So that's the biggest pressure that I always have when I do my live shots, is always to make sure that I'm helpful and I'm really doing something good for the people that we're trying to profile at the time. Not necessarily me, because we mess up all the time. Right. I don't care about messing up on TV. That's just what we do. But that's
You're able
that's
to
what it
roll
came
with
out.
it. We were talking. We have a mutual friend, Elizabeth Espinoza. Shout out to you, EE. But we met years ago when Elizabeth was at Fox with you and Nichelle. I
Yeah.
love that you brought up Nichelle the other day. By the way,
Yeah.
she's on Entertainment Tonight as a host. So she went from Good Day LA all the way on up to the
Yeah.
big guys. So I love
And
that.
I'm still here.
Oh, it's all good. You're the king of morning shows.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
But I was telling Bob about a story when Elizabeth and I became friends because we had a story go wrong and my client said a curse word on the air, but he's French. And we said that it was shoot, that he said shoot. And she got in trouble. Bob then told me that he had a situation with another skateboarder, Rob Dyrdek.
Yep.
So tell the
It
story and tell him what
went really
happened.
early. The Fantasy Factory before it was even a TV show, but there were just a bunch of kids in there, and they went there early in the morning, and they had everything from like a zip line to a pit where you can just go up a ramp and on a bicycle and do a wheelie and fall into the pit. And so on live TV, they put me on the zip line and they put a camera on the top of the head, on my head. And as I'm flying across the room, of course, there's no way they didn't tell me how to stop this thing. And so I'm approaching the wall and the O
Yeah.
shoot came out, and I was like, and I got the letter from my manager that said, on this day at 8:30, you said an expletive, and yeah.
So if you don't know, the news stations get fined,
Yeah.
and then they're required to write up.
I
reporter.
recently thought I did it again, and the trouble is if you start doing morning TV and you don't really care about the camera anymore, then it truly is you're just sitting here having a conversation with you and not even thinking that you're really on live TV, and on a show when you're constantly having these conversations
Right.
with your friends and laughing.
Yeah.
Invariably your true self. I always just try to be myself. I don't try to pretend or try to,
Right.
So if you're actually being yourself, your true self will come out.
Especially on
so
a zip
if you're
line
not
with no
careful,
brakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was diving into a bowl with a skate. There's something about skateboarders. We bring out the worst. Right?
Skateboarders, yeah.
I can't even say I'm a skateboarder. They bring out the worst.
You're skateboarder adjacent.
Yes. Skateboarder adjacent. I like
Yeah.
that. So you were starting to talk about storytelling, just the need to kind of become an expert right on site. But we've seen a lot of shifts in media, especially in the last decade. There's a lot of
Sure.
trust issues. What do you think are some of the biggest barriers that are facing our newsrooms today? How do you go about instilling trust when you can't necessarily vet sources because you're live? Like how are you seeing things evolve?
Yeah. I mean, we lean on our entire team to try and vet these sources before they even
Right.
get on the air. It's tough. It really is, and we do a lot of stuff on the cuff, extemporaneously. So, yeah, it's a good question. It's very tough. I mean, fortunately, I haven't ever been in that position where I've made like egregious mistakes where we have to correct them like that on air. But it just takes a lot of people looking over the content constantly, to make sure that you get it right.
Yeah, and we're going into an era of news coverage that is not going to be that fun. I've talked to a lot of journalists, and
Yeah.
a lot of people, a lot of newsrooms are staffing up to accommodate all of the election activities that are going to be happening. We're already seeing, shifts in coverage priorities.
Sure.
I'm sure as we get closer, a lot of your stories are going to have nuances and layers that kind of tie back. How are you feeling about the upcoming election season? Do you get to kind of avoid it because of Nope? Okay.
No, of course not. Right.
So-
I feel like the last election just happened, and here we are approaching the next
Right.
election, right? And I think it's also the world that we live in now, that we live in this world where the media is always in front of us, so we're always constantly chasing it, and it's like as soon as one ends, we were talking about as soon as Christmas is over, and like all of a sudden here we are back in October and Halloween here again, and it's kind of the same because these election cycles tend to be really short, so it does get kind of intense, I have to say. And over the past several years, because I know everyone feels the same way, that we're more polarized than ever, and
Right.
probably there's a large percentage of people who are like, not everything is black and white, but we always deal in these absolutes. And
Do you feel responsible to not contribute to that as a member of the media, or is it very hard to balance that?
you know, it's my job to give people a platform to tell their side or their beliefs or what they think. And so as long as I give each side equal time, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Unless it's just completely wackadoodle. I'll leave that for my manager to decide whether to put stuff like that on the air. Yeah.
Have you ever been in a situation where you could see it going downhill really fast in your live TV? What are some of your tactics? Do your producers know your tells well enough to pull you out of it?
Yeah, all the time. Especially like in like riot type of situations or protests that turned violent. It's yeah, you gotta just watch, and that's where we're going into this world where there's a lot of multimedia journalists, which are single journalists. So it's definitely more of a challenge when you don't have another person or even a third person on your team to be an extra set of eyes. But I mean, just recently when after the George Floyd protests, and there was all the looting in Los Angeles, and we were there in the middle of the night watching some of the looting, and we were really kind of front and center, probably as maybe twice the distance between me and you, watching and showing this on live TV. Looters go in and ransack a particular store. I didn't know that the person was approaching me, and later on I find out because on my social media was going crazy, just like that guy has a gun, and apparently he had reached in his waistband, and I had no idea, but you put yourselves in these situations, and in retrospect, had we gotten a little too close? Maybe, but when you're in the moment, you're just telling the story, and you're just sort of in the moment.
I hope we're away from all that. I hope we don't go back to that. But you've had to cover forest fires.
I was surprised when that happened, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest. Like in that morning that I woke up that morning, I didn't know that the day was going to turn out the way it did.
Right.
And so when I first woke up and I had heard that the protest was going outside, I walked out with my own camera, with the iPhone, literally, and started live streaming some of the protests, and then was just there all night long. And as it sort of unraveled into the chaos and the looting that night, yeah, I had no idea that was going to happen. So I feel like a lot of times, like you say, I don't want that to happen again, but it's always a possibility.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like it sounds very similar to what I've heard some of my friends say is when they're covering forest fires, they can just change so fast.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're caught and you're like, how am I going to get out of here?
Yeah.
I've heard that from like an actual news photographer who was taking still photos, and all of a sudden she was trapped.
Yes.
I mean, that feels very similar to some of these protests and how they evolve.
Yeah. That's happened to me before too,
Yeah.
where we've been covering a wildfire, and early morning hours, it's dark, the winds are howling, and there was one particular moment it appeared we were really far away from the fire, so I thought we were being really responsible. But when you have these Santa Ana winds that, if they're super strong, there was one time when the flames, literally, you see this wall of flames just coming your way, and we were running as fast as we could. This was before people were using cell phones, and we were using cell phone technology to broadcast, so we were attached to the truck.
Oh, yeah.
So we had a long cord.
The cord.
And the photographer was running with the cord, and we're running together, and the cord just snaps. But as we turned around and we looked, and our whole news truck was engulfed in flames.
Oh my goodness!
So
I have not heard anybody getting that close.
They can go really fast, and it's deceiving. It's deceiving because you think that, yeah, you're safe, and you're not. So all those warnings that people tell you, they're to be believed.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of shift gears because we've talked a little bit about your story approach and other things, but let's learn a little bit about Bob DeCastro before you were Bob DeCastro, the legacy talent of Fox. Tell us, where did you grow up? You have brothers?
I have a big family. I grew up in South Carolina. My mother was a...
Do you like barbecue? No, is it North Carolina
I do.
barbecue? South Carolina barbecue?
Yeah, I guess I like barbecue. I guess they do have barbecue down there, huh?
Yeah, there's like a different kind of barbecue.
Yeah.
The Carolina barbecue versus the Texas barbecue.
Yeah. I grew up in an immigrant household, so we didn't eat a lot of barbecue. Barbecue wasn't always on the menu.
Fair. Fair.
But I did go to elementary. When I went for school lunches, there were grits and collard greens and things like that. So you end up liking those things. So yeah, I grew up in an immigrant family. My parents are from the Philippines. My mother was a physician. And my father was in the Navy, and that's how they made passage here to this country. And they had 5 kids, so I'm the second of 5 boys. I have a twin brother also. And we grew up in South Carolina. We all kind of were really close in age, so it was... my parents were very successful, but still trying to raise 5 kids and sending 5 kids to college was still a struggle. It was still difficult. So I applied for a number of scholarships, and I got a full scholarship through the Navy, and that's how I ended up. And I had grown up liking television or wanting to be on television, and saw anchors on TV that I thought I wanted to emulate. So I decided to go to Boston University, which has a good communications program. And but my scholarship with the Navy was a full scholarship. You have to serve. Right. And so I did 4 years in the Navy, and then left the service and decided to pursue TV.
And what was your first market?
My first market, well, it's interesting. I got my first job in TV. I was here in Long Beach, when it was the Long Beach Naval Shipyards, sitting with one of my friends, and I was looking through the classified ads for a job as a reporter. And I found one. It was a job with Cox Cable down in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
It was a cable access show, and I went in, auditioned for the job, and the guy said, "Hey, you're pretty good." And they hired me, but it was a show that never got on the air.
Oh, no.
But I had a tape.
Yeah,
so
you got a reel.
I took that tape, and I took that reel, and I had a book that had all of these, and I thought, what cities could I live in? What cities could I live in? And I just mass mailed this, and then I got my first actual TV job on air in Chico, actually Redding, which is in Shasta County and upstate. And I was there for 3 months. I was there with one other guy, and the guy hated it, hated living in Redding, so he wanted to move back to San Francisco, be with his girlfriend. And he got a call from someone in Reno and said, "Hey, are you interested in a job here?" He says, "Well, I'm going to San Francisco, but why don't you talk to Bob? He's right here, and he'll go to Reno." And so
Chico was that bad.
At that time, Reno had a live truck, right? So you could actually take a satellite truck, and so you could actually go. That was a big deal that day back then when you can actually use a satellite technology to do a live shot. So I went to Reno, biggest little city, was there for 2 years. And then I was getting this interest in all these other cities, and then I got a little dejected because I wanted to go to the big time, and I decided, well, I'll go to Vegas.
I mean, Reno, Vegas, you
Right.
kind of like the lights, right?
So I'm Nevadan,
Yeah.
go Silver State. Yeah, I was there for a year and a half.
Was that kind of an interesting gig?
I I I personally have loved everywhere that I've worked. And part of it was like if you're in it, if you sit there and take the time to really experience where you are, experience people, enjoy people, and in this career, because as a youngster, you're a young person who has this really exciting job where you have access to the world, basically, and you're doing it with other young people like yourself. It was fun. It was fun. Vegas, the one thing I didn't like about Las Vegas was it was too hot.
Yeah, it really is.
It was too hot. And in the summertime, we would stand outside and I'd do live shots, and I could feel the tops of my feet burning. And so I thought, the second summer, I got to get out of here. And I got a call, and that's why I ended up in New York. And I got the job in New York, which was like, a dream job. And then I was
And
there
then
for 4 years, and then LA.
We got you back. Southern
Yeah.
California calling.
Yeah.
It's great. Well, we're gonna move over to some live questions
Okay.
in a little bit, but I did want to kind of touch on something that that you don't really speak publicly on very often, but not because you're any reason. You're just a little bit more of a private person. But I think it's really interesting that you have maintained a 22-year relationship.
Yeah.
With your partner, Ken. Whoops, sorry. But you've seen the world shift quite a bit, and not just as a multicultural man, from an immigrant family, but from somebody coming from a marginalized community, the LGBTQ community. What are some of those lessons what are some of those things that you've seen shift, and why did you stay quiet for so long? That's great.
Times have changed a lot over the past several decades. And when I first got into the Navy, first of all, that was the beginning of my career. And it was during Don't Ask, Don't Tell time. And I had actually, at that time in my life, actually thought to stay in the service and continue my military service. But then it was just too hard, and I thought I wanted to live my life, right? And I even had thought to go into different avenues of public service, but maybe the CIA or the FBI, and I thought too similar, and I had already been in that kind of an environment, and I just didn't want to hide anymore, and I wanted to live my life, and so that is why I got into television, and then I never got into TV thinking that I would have to talk about my personal life, right? Because you're just a journalist and you're just telling stories.
But now you're legacy, Bob. Your legacy.
So that's also part of it. So I just never felt like the need to do so. And I think it's wonderful. Like now, all of that can be celebrated and people can just talk freely and openly and not feel ashamed or not feel that it's going to be a barrier to their promotion or their hiring.
Which you've seen happen.
Which I have seen happen. I've heard the backroom discussions of things that have happened, of people saying, even to a colleague of mine, when discussing this person, is he too gay to be on TV? That was something that was heard. So when you think of those things in the back of your head, sometimes you think, would that be an obstacle to your advancement? And so over the years, I've just always just like relied on my journalism, my hard work ethic, showing up to work every day, not calling out sick, and having sort of like a positive, optimistic approach to doing the job. So it's just never been a question, but I'm so thankful that Ken has been immensely supportive over the years, and and my family has been really supportive over the years, and so they've been just a huge, they've provided a huge foundation for me to be able to just like do my job.
Right. And it's a hard job. Like, you go to bed at what time?
I go to bed around 8 or 9.
And then
usually around 9. It's around like 9. Sometimes I look over, it's like 9:30. I can't go to bed.
And then your
And
alarm
then my
is
alarm
set.
is set. Although I'm probably getting up before the alarm. I got up this morning at 2:38.
That's a hard life to balance, a personal life.
Yeah.
And I mean, the morning show is no joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Let me tell you.
That's what I love about you, Bob. Is
Yeah,
every time I see you bright and early, you have a spring in your step. And I always offer you coffee. You never want it. Like, I think you're already kind of caffeinated.
I love it, and I encourage you because as public relations people, you also have access to a lot of things, and I know that it's a little bit different because you have clients and you get the pressures of having to perform for them, and it's a little bit different. But you do have access to a lot of great, and wonderful things, and you're able to see life in a very different way.
Right.
And I have a job where I have met and experienced the richest of the rich, the poorest of the poor. When in Vegas, everything is like, what's behind the scenes. We're pulling the curtain behind everything. So if you're at a restaurant, right, and we always go to these, I think to myself, I'm at a fine dining restaurant, but like I've seen the kitchen, right? I mean, the kitchen is like, is it really all that great? It's just, you see life for what it is. And I feel very fortunate that every day I get to wake up and I get to see a different aspect of life. And I'm always surprised, like as much as I've traveled through every corner of Southern California in the 20 plus years that I've been here, there are so many days when I walk into something and I thought, I've never seen this before in my life, and it's a new experience that I get to see, or a new place that had been there for a long time, or just talking to new people. So being able to just tell those stories and meeting new people every single day, I'm really fortunate to have the job that I have.
I love that. So with that, let's open up the questions to everyone.
Thank you for everything that you do. My name is
Thank you.
Nishta, and I work at Families Forward, and we've been lucky to partner with you on highlighting the stories of families as they go through some of the hardest time in their lives and
Yes.
being at risk of or experiencing homelessness. My question has nothing to do with homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is your take on the morning show on HBO? And I'm really intrigued by how much of that is truth versus not. And just love to hear your ideas.
It's been a while since I am not good at remembering storylines at like because
Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon.
I do remember a little bit. So,
Matt
but
Lauer.
what I can tell you is that I think in any profession there are those sort of like dynamics, right? The competition that you have, even if you think about it within your own organization. And so certainly a lot of that does exist. Is there anything specific that's from there? A lot of it does, but it definitely, I do remember thinking a lot of it was far-fetched too, and thinking, oh, come on, right? But some of the simple storylines and some of the dynamics, yeah, they exist. They're human beings, right? In any type of environment, any type of work environment, and you're going to get conflict and the sweet stories and like the drama that happens at home.
But the reality of the producers running the show behind the scenes, talking to the anchor, I mean, that was all pretty accurate, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cutting over to weather.
Yeah.
Obviously there's going to be some drama in a
Yeah.
drama.
Yeah.
But I thought
Yeah.
that they depicted the newsroom pretty
For the most
accurately.
part, yeah.
Yeah.
That dynamic I think was pretty accurate. I'm really bad at remembering TV shows and movies because I wake up so early, so I fall asleep every time I'm watching TV.
Yeah.
So sorry, but I think in general, a lot of it It's true to form, but then there's obviously it's like way over dramatized. Like I stopped watching that I think after like a couple of seasons because I was like, this is just
Third season just is out and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
So sorry, Jennifer.
But you do bring up a really interesting question that I wanted to get to, and you've mentioned a few times. You have a team of people behind you, and there's a special producer that you kind of end up getting connected with a lot. So we call her your producer, even though
She's not my producer,
She's
yeah.
one of million.
I love her. Yeah.
But tell us about Diane.
Diane Sanchez, who is one of our
Hi,
assignment
Diane.
and Diane, if you're watching us, she knows that I love her because we talk almost every day, and it just so happens that in the sort of sweet spot that I'm in for the morning news, because I anchor the 4 to 6, and then I go out and I run and I change clothes and I usually go out and am in that spot where during those next several hours we have a lot of feature stories. And frankly, not everybody can do those types of stories, right? Some people just don't have you have to have a certain personality to do some of these stories. And so I'm often assigned to these stories, and she's the one generally working very hand in hand and diligently and immersed with all of you people to make sure that the story is all buttoned up. And by the time I get to any sort of location, it's basically handed to me on a silver platter and with a bow on it, and I just have to open it and see what's inside, right? And she really does a lot of the legwork, because if a lot of that stuff doesn't happen, and it's important, I will tell you, that we have all of that stuff, because there's not that much time before the show goes on the air, that segment goes on the air, to really to make sure that we have all of the elements to make sure that it is really, really a beautiful story that's told. So there are elements like she gathers videos, pictures, and I see the emails, so she's really aggressive and pushing for, we want visuals, which is what she says. And so she's really great at like making sure that, we put our best foot forward. But again, if you don't put your best foot forward, then we can't put our best foot forward. And I see both. Whenever I walk into any live shot, I can generally tell how something is going to go, right? With the amount of preparation or the thought that has been put into how you want to present your client.
Yeah, that's great. And the thing I think our team really appreciates about Diane is she's pretty responsive, and she'll tell you right away.
Yeah.
It's not gonna work, or
Right.
she'll tell you why too, which is really valuable because then it helps us reshape stories moving forward. And so I've always appreciated that about how she works with our team.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. I understand, like, you don't have easy jobs, and I know it's really tough to have to cold call or annoy people all the time, and we do a lot of that too. So I understand. I certainly am empathetic towards having to reach out to people to not get any sort of response, and sometimes no is better than no response at all, than
Right.
just like hearing dead air on the other end, right?
Right.
So yeah.
It's easier to say to a client they passed rather than I can't get a hold of them.
Right,
you know?
right.
So no, Diane's really great at that.
Yeah.
Do you have another question? Great.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for being here. My name is Eric Morgan. I work for 5 Point. I was just curious, based on some of the feedback you gave about Diane and others along the course of your career, is there any particular individuals that mentored you or really taught you a lesson maybe early on in your career that something you might impart on people listening here or colleagues of yours that you think was really valuable?
I've had so many sort of mentors or people that have taught me things. One thing I can say is, and it became sort of like apparent to me as like I'm looking at a lot of familiar faces in the room, people I've worked with in the past, and people on your team, is one of the most important things that I see in terms of pitching stories or trying to get your story out there is really the building of the relationship. So I can't even tell you how many emails I get. I've gotten to the point where I can't even erase them fast enough. So we get them a lot. And having important personal relationships with people will trump anything, any press release any day. And I have friendships, some relationships with PR people, public information officers that really go above and beyond just a regular professional relationship, and that even gets a lot easier. So the deeper your relationship you can have with a journalist or someone that you're trying to work with, I think the better. And a lot of times, because you get so much stuff, we can't vet it quick enough. But if you have someone on the other end that's willing to even like hear you out, and you're presenting them with a keyhole, and I've got the wrong key, maybe we can figure out how we can change the key to make it fit, right? But you're not going to have the time to have that kind of a conversation with a person if you don't have that relationship. So I think that's probably one of the most important things.
Yeah, because you're really good at saying, okay, I like it, needs some work, or you'll work with us to get it to where it needs to be.
Yeah.
So we have a few more minutes, and I saw a hand over here. There's one over here.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
I'm Jennifer Magana with Beyond 15 Communications.
Jennifer.
So one of my questions is, I know we've had a lot of evolving ways we reach out to you and other journalists throughout our times, particularly for broadcast. It's all different than print, magazine. So I started in the days where we would fax the news desks.
Right.
And we've evolved from faxing to emailing to the cold, calls desk side. Where do you see that evolving in like the near future? Like, is there a next point to, touch point to be able to reach you guys that we should start thinking ahead of? And
I'm getting a lot more social media too, right?
Do you like when people slide in the DMs?
I don't mind if it's a good story.
Okay.
If it's a good story, and it's got to be presented in a good way. Okay. One of the things is that we get a lot of press releases and we get a lot of story pitches, and when I tell stories or I edit stories and I'm telling a story, we talked about working in a visual medium and how to tell a story in the most compelling fashion. Well, a press release is also a story, right? And it's telling the story in the most compelling fashion. So how do you get someone's attention? Is when I do packages and I do stories, I often I won't wait to put the most compelling or the most important piece of video in the middle and build someone up to it. Building up is the worst because you only have a second to really grab someone's attention. So if your best shot is someone jumping out of an airplane or something like that, start off with the person jumping off the airplane and then go backwards and tell them why jumping off the airplane was important, and then jump off the airplane again, right?
And then offer to have Bob jump off the airplane, just make sure he doesn't break the FTC laws.
Yeah, I just think that I don't get annoyed if the story is good. The story is good, and it's hard because I know there's so many, but the other thing, and I was saying, Eric, is to really start to build relationships and to set yourself apart from others, right? Because calling me is like a lot easier, and I'll get it. I don't mind the text, right? Are you able to do this? And Chelsea will text me or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking about it. Yeah. It's just that we get a lot, so I'm not ignoring anyone. It's just that there's a lot. But that's what I think. I think you have to be relentless. I mean, you can't. I know it's. I know.
That's a great word.
I know it's kind of but it's what you do. I mean,
and you're not annoyed by it.
I mean, sometimes, but I mean, how are you going to get if you don't annoy them, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
But that's
it's less annoying if you know them, right? Then you're like, oh God, Brenda's calling me again. What is this about? Yeah, but at least, yeah, I would say I'm telling you a secret now. Just start building relationships. That's what I mean.
That's good.
That's what I would do.
We have another question.
I wanted to say hi. I'm from Chapman University.
Oh, yes.
But
Go
I have
Chapman.
a quick question. So, say you have a story and you're looking for expert commentary. we don't want to be the story sometimes, but we have brilliant professors and expertise that we'd like to share for your story as a layer.
Yeah.
Are you interested in that? Do you already have your sources ready to go?
We always need experts. I will say, I mean, they don't know who I'm talking about specifically, but I will say that some of the experts that we have on air aren't always the best. So, and it's just easy because we live in such a fast-paced world that these people are always available to us at a moment's notice, and we have we have their phone numbers on speed dial. So that's why these people tend to appear all the time, because they're reliable. So we always need experts. That's something that we always need. So give me your number. I'll help you. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I know we're at time, but I just had one last question. You've covered as a legacy talent. I'm sorry, I'm just giving you such a hard time. But
Not my words.
as an OG,
Okay.
yeah,
Go ahead.
you've covered this region so in depth. You've talked about your care for it. You have been on the front lines of some really interesting moments, some unforgettable, some you wish you could forget. But what inspires you about Southern Californians and the community we live in?
I love that what everybody says about Southern California, and I think we all realize that we live in a beautiful climate, right? And we're lucky enough to live where we see sunshine the majority of the year. And then telling stories here, it really is wonderful that we live in a place where we have such diversity in all our communities. And that's what never ceases to always surprise me, is to see a different corner or aspect of this giant tapestry that we have that is Southern California, and that we get to tap into that every single day. So I love it whenever I go into Little Saigon or South LA or East LA or Orange County, just playing. Yeah, it's whenever we go into any communities, and it never ceases to amaze me, just the vibrancy that we see in life here in Southern California.
Well, you certainly bring it to life every morning, Monday through Friday. You can see him on air 4 to 6 as an anchor, and then hopefully out in the field on your stories. Thank you, Bob, for all that you do and for your continued and enduring partnership all these years.
Thank you for having me. And call me. You won't annoy me.
Yeah. Thank you.